Battleground, Washington. Located in the heart of Clark County, this area has experienced rapid growth over the past 30 years as thousands of families have discovered the natural beauty and quiet lifestyle of the city and North Clark County. Today, over 17,000 call Battleground home, and what was once a quaint small town has been transformed into a thriving, growing center of activity.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.
The story of Battleground begins here, in the area just east of Battleground Lake. In 1855, Captain William Strong led a group of volunteers from Fort Vancouver to pursue and bring back to protective custody a group of Indians led by Chief Umtouch. Strong caught up with the group somewhere near this valley, in an area then known as Old Burn. The captain convinced Chief Umtouch and his group to return to the fort peacefully, but the Indian chief was mysteriously killed before the journey back to Vancouver was started. Captain Strong, allowing for a proper burial for the chief, returned to Fort Vancouver empty-handed, with only the group's promise to return after honoring their fallen leader. Those at the fort were sure that Strong had allowed the group to escape and subjected him to endless humiliation. The area known as Old Burn quickly was referred to as Strong's battleground as a lasting reminder of his failure. Of course, days later the Indian group proved true to their word, returning to Fort Vancouver as Captain Strong had predicted. The desire to ridicule the captain soon faded, but the name endured, although without the reminder of Strong's connection. And so it remained until 7 years later, when President Lincoln would change the course of the western United States with one document, the Homestead Act. The Donation Land Claim Act of 1850, which was intended to promote homesteading in the original Oregon Territory, had expired at the end of 1855. The government remained eager to encourage expansion to the West Coast. Signed into law in May of 1862, the Homestead Act afforded free title of up to 160 acres of undeveloped land anywhere outside the original 13 colonies to any individual or family hardy enough to improve the land once they got there. The battleground area was certainly undeveloped in 1862, and the move was quickly on. Control of the area we know as the Pacific Northwest had been in dispute since 1818, when the British and United States agreed to joint occupancy of the territory. The establishment of Fort Vancouver by the Hudson's Bay Company in 1825 gave control of the area's growing commerce and trade to the British, with a network reaching throughout the Western Americas. The area was ultimately claimed by the United States in 1846, when the Oregon Treaty established the 49th parallel as the northern boundary of this young country. Congress acted to create the Oregon Territory in 1848, and soon after the United States Army arrived to help provide for peaceful settlement of the new wilderness. By 1850, a census of the area totaled 220 residents north of the Columbia River. The new Army outpost brought soldiers from all walks of life. One of those was John Tuke, an Irish immigrant who had enlisted in 1860 in Boston. By 1862, Tuke had established a homestead at the base of what is now known as Tuke's Mountain, just east of present-day Battleground.
Yeah, I think some of those guys came from the East Coast, and this was new land and lots of opportunity that they saw.
The Tukes were followed to the battleground area by the Bean, Cressup, Miller, Palmer, and Wooden families, who cut a wagon trail from the Van Atta's Brush Prairie area home to the valley just east of the lake. An 1867 election recorded 11 voters in the battleground precinct, and those homesteaders were working hard to establish their new community.
Where the community of Crawford is now was the original battleground. The original battleground school was just barely up onto the hill as you go up to the present entrance to Battleground Lake. There was a store there, and there was a depot as well. There's a big house just a little south of where you turn into Battleground Lake, and that was an inn. It was a home, but it was also, there were lots of rooms in the house, and they rented out those rooms.
This early group of settlers came to the battleground area looking to start a new life. The lure of free land and the riches and resources that came with it was enough to lead these hardy souls west. The lands they found waiting were rich in timber, with abundant pastures and plentiful water nearby as well. The early settlers began logging operations to provide the materials for the building of their homes, quite often right where those trees once stood. The adjacent lands afforded ample room for farming and livestock, providing food for the family. These two industries have grown from the roots of pure survival to become the foundation of early Clark County and battleground business and daily life.
We didn't buy anything unless, we didn't eat anything unless we raised it on the farm. In fact, I don't remember ever having lettuce for long years, for many years, because we didn't raise it, and we didn't buy it either then, so. But all 8 of us grew up, and there wasn't anybody that was underfed or anything like that.
That somewhat primitive lifestyle was about to see significant changes when Robert Hall settled on the East Fork of the Lewis River around 1873. He called the area Hall's Crossing, and it set in motion the changes that would form the city of Battleground we know today. Crossing streams and rivers was often a challenge, requiring locations with easy access, relatively smooth bottoms, and slow-moving waters to allow passage by the wagons, livestock, and passengers. The area settled by Robert Hall provided just such a location, where the early pioneers could ford the river and continue their journey north. Soon the area was home to stores, a post office, mills, a doctor, and even a hotel. While the early pioneers arrived by wagon, by 1887 the homesteaders were making the most of current technology to help develop North Clark County.
When there was high water, the steamboats could come clear up to Louisville. And so transportation was what it was all about. You had to get somewhere in order to develop anything. The roads were terrible. They were either dust in the summer or they were mud in the winter.
The county's first covered bridge was built here after the original structure was swept downstream in an 1883 flood. Named Hall's Bridge, it remained in use until 1926. The area today is known best as home to Louisville Park, a popular recreational destination since the 1920s. Developed by the Works Progress Administration in the 1930s, Louisville has remained a favorite gathering spot for family and friends for over 90 years. The future of Battleground began to take firm shape with the arrival of August Richter in 1892. After purchasing a store from Mrs. Jane Burke near Wooden Creek, he quickly expanded to house the post office and the local office of Cape Horn Telegraph Company, which now linked the upstart town and other local communities to the big city of Portland, Oregon. The area continued its slow but steady growth for the next several years, with more residents and businesses following Richter's lead into the 20th century. While those early residents were shaping the foundation of the new city, something big was happening further south in Clark County, and it was moving full steam ahead towards Battleground. By 1883, the railroad had been extended from California north to Portland. Arriving in Vancouver in 1888, the line began extending towards North Clark County 10 years later, primarily to ferry the timber being produced by the growing number of logging and sawmill operations in and around the Battleground area. The railroad was completed to New Battleground in 1901, and with it came the promise of prosperity and growth. The sign at the new train depot officially removed the name from the original settlement, and the area was ready to take advantage of the opportunities the railroad would bring. In 1902, Peter Onsdorf arrived from Hawkinson and opened his store on Main Street, stocking his shelves with items made available by the new railroad. Onsdorf had settled on Bell Mountain in the 1880s and could see the potential that had drawn August Richter to the area 10 years earlier. While Richter was developing the south side of Main Street, Onsdorf staked his claim on the north.
They were entrepreneurs, and they were interested in having a town there, and so it just developed that way.
Richter and Onsdorf were among the earliest to see and promote the future of Battleground, but an unforeseen event that same year would change North Clark County faster than either could imagine. In mid-September of 1902, the Yakult burn consumed nearly 239,000 acres of forest lands in Skamania, Cowlitz, and Clark counties, still the largest recorded fire in the state's history. With no organized methods available to fight the fires and the dry east winds to fan the flames, the inferno eventually cut a path over 30 miles long in just 36 hours, before finally burning itself out along the Lewis River. 38 people lost their lives and hundreds were left homeless. The fire also destroyed 12 billion board feet of prime timber, a staggering $30 million loss in 1902 currency. The need to quickly salvage what remained of the timber caused unprecedented growth in the area. Logging operations and sawmills covered the landscape, and the railroad was quickly completed to Yakult, both to deliver workers and remove the lumber.
Weyerhaeuser kind of took over the country, and it was very important that they get those trees out immediately, or they would have rotted. And so it wasn't just Weyerhaeuser, there were lots of other private companies that came out to this whole area, and that had a lot to do with Battleground.
The growth of the area was not confined to just Battleground, as all of North Clark County was changed forever by the new activity.
Yakult grew as well. It was a bigger town than Battleground by far. Battleground was a good stop before Yakult. They could get more wood for their steam engines and get supplies, get water, and then go on up to Yakult.
The logging industry provided more than just jobs for the area, in many cases coloring how those residents viewed the world.
My dad was born in 1906, and he remembers when he was a kid growing up in the Pleasant Valley area that there was a sawmill almost every mile. And the thing that really struck him was that the sunsets were glorious. All that smoke in the air from the sawmill steam engines, which were fed by wood, the slab wood, it just made for a fantastic sunsets.
Battleground truly was on its way. New businesses were popping up left and right to handle the needs of the growing population. A 1904 census by Peter Onsdorf totaled 101 residents. In 1903, Onsdorf and D.B. Mickey laid the groundwork for the new town by officially platting just over 6 blocks on the north side of Maine from the railroad west to Wooden Creek. Richter soon followed suit, adding over 11 blocks parallel to the railroad and adjacent to the south side of Main Street in 2 subsequent additions. As the community grew, so did the need for improvement. Automobiles had begun to appear in town, although their impact wasn't immediately felt.
Many times It was just the thing to have a car, but you didn't necessarily take it out and use it to go somewhere. You took the horse and wagon to make sure you got there.
To provide suitable access to the new goods and services, it was often left to the residents to pool their resources and roll up their sleeves.
It was good to have a team of horses and a wagon, because then you could either kind of rent those to the county, and you would get something off your tax bill for that, or you could actually work with them hauling rock, and that would help your tax bill as well. And a lot of times farmers would, in order to encourage the county, they would give up part of their land for roads just so there would be a road there.
The first surfaced roads were covered with wooden planks and began appearing in Battleground by 1910.
Well, the planking came as soon as there were sawmills to build, to saw some lumber, so there were some planks. What they used primarily were the flat sides of the outside of the log. And of course, they would sink down into the ground as well and get busted up. And so it took a lot to keep a plank road or a corduroy road like they talked about.
Of course, those improvements combined with the newest in technology didn't come with any guarantees.
My dad bought a car, I don't remember what year it was, but it was years ago, of course, and ran off the side of the driveway there, and that was the last time he ever drove that thing, too.
It seems, by the standards of the day, that Battleground had all that it needed, and for the most part, it did. But progress was again on the horizon, and by the end of 1910, several new additions to the town would be in place that would rival the railroad in their impact on the community. Probably the most significant of those changes happened right downtown, when the residents established an identity that has remained strong for 100 years. Many of the early homesteaders had very little formal schooling, and these pioneers were eager to provide their children with a proper education that they themselves had not received. The settlers donated their land, materials, provisions, and labor for the construction and operation of the schools in their communities. These early facilities were modest at best, with only the bare essentials to provide some comfort during a day of learning. These early schools also served as a focal point for activity in their communities, with many of the buildings being used well into the 20th century, in some cases with very minimal upgrading along the way.
Old wooden building, the play shed and everything else was still there at the old place, and there was one teacher that taught 8 grades, had a potbelly stove, and had an entrance for the wood from the outside.
While these early schools served their communities well, the growing population and desire to provide further education led 2 school districts, which surrounded and included the new population center of Battleground, to pursue consolidation of their efforts. In October of 1908, residents of the Dublin and Maple Grove school districts petitioned for permission to consolidate their 2 schools, a move not everyone supported.
Lots of people coming in, there were lots of kids, and that's when the consolidation happened between Dublin to the north and Maple Grove to the south. And there was some hassles over that. You had the Catholics and the Protestant situation, Catholics in the Irish Dublin area, and the Protestants probably mostly Lutheran in the southern end. And so it was very difficult to get the consensus to actually build between the 2.
Following a public hearing to air the differences in March of 1909, the consolidation was approved and Clark County School District number 64 was born. The month of April brought the first school board members. G.C. Scotton, William Bramhall, and Peter Onsdorf moved quickly to secure a site for their new facility. After considering all four corners at Main and Parkway, they settled on the more level and least swampy northwest corner, which also came with fewer stumps. Still, not everyone was convinced, and a bond election to raise money for the new building was defeated in May of 1909, making it necessary to continue the use of the old Dublin and Maple Grove buildings for another year. Despite the disagreements, the new schoolhouse was completed and ready for use in 1910, and its 2 classrooms and partial basement were now overflowing with students, with R.S. Durkee leading the way as the first principal. While early reports had called the district Union, the school was ultimately named Central because of its location within the district. By the time the building opened, it was already too small for the growing student body, and in 1912 it was raised to provide a full basement with 2 additional rooms. Soon after, a dirt-floored gym with basketball hoops was added, providing an indoor area for organized recreation. While these additions were not embraced by all in the community, they provided lasting memories for the children.
We had intramural sports during the school year, and that was just between the different rooms, though. And I know I was a forward on the basketball team. It was in 3 courts. They had sectioned off in 3s, and in the middle court was a jumping center and a running center, and of course, and then the other team had a jumping center and a running center, and you couldn't even cross that line from and I was on the one side that we had 2 forwards on our team, and then the other side had 2 guards for that same section. And then the same way with the other 2 forwards and 2 guards. And we always hung over the line there trying to get the ball from the centers there, and every time you made a basket, the ball would go to the center again and jump ball instead of, like it is now.
In 1913, the district added the technical training building to the campus, and in 1915, all 4 high school grades were accredited. Battleground's first graduating class in 1916 totaled 4 members, and the school was a source of pride and unity for both its students and the community. Although the school had been strategically located to provide access, it was still up to the children to get themselves to the classroom. The addition of full high school classes was enticement enough for some to get there any way they could.
There was one, I don't think he went charter oak school, but anyway, he walked from Lay Center, that's where he lived. He walked from Lay Center to Balgon High School every single day.
The school district took its first steps to solving this problem in 1918, when it purchased its first school bus. Like the early school buildings, these buses provided only the basics in transportation and couldn't be used after Thanksgiving due to the road conditions. Even with no heat, no window glass, and only roll-down canvas curtains to protect the children from the elements, the bus was still a far cry better than the alternative.
And some of the kids that got into trouble, they were kicked off the bus. And one kid, I remember his name was Brown. He lived on the 72nd Avenue, off of 72nd Avenue there. And he hung on to the underneath the rolled up curtains, hung on to that, and every time the bus stopped, I guess he'd take a rest or something, but he hung on to that.
These students were now in a position to receive a quality education, although in some cases their youthful endeavors got in the way.
We skipped a few days, it was long. There were days, special days to skip that were very secretive. Not one kid in the whole class showed up. They were on skip day. But we got in bad trouble for that. I can't remember what we got in trouble, what we had to do, but I know it was bad.
The schools have provided a wealth of memories over the years for the community itself as well as those who have walked its halls. Although the landscape has changed, the activities and recollections of those years span the decades.
At lunchtime, the boys, they could leave the school grounds, but not the girls. And
That figures.
no, we were never allowed, but we'd stand in these windows, and I remember there was Oliver Bramley and boys like that were popular in school, you know. And we'd stand in the windows, and instead of eating our lunch, we'd stand in that window waiting for them boys to come outside, because we never got to see them or associate with them in the school ground. And we'd wait till they come from their lunch, and they'd all be smoking cigarettes and had leather jackets on. Oh God, they were what the girls nowadays call my grandson hot, you know.
I went to Pleasant Valley. We had 6 grades. In the 6th grade, I was the only student in the 6th grade.
Maybe there were 25, 30 kids in the whole school. There might be 1 or 2 kids to a class, but she taught the whole business.
Threw some pepper or something on the stove, I guess, that one time too.
Well, and then east of there was the Cumtux School, which was one of the many ways to pronounce the Umtouch family. We had minimal amount of playground equipment. We did have a teeter-totter, which I guess now is considered dangerous. But we used to love to give bumps, and that was try to dislodge the person on the other end.
We just went to school and then graduated and glad to get out.
Over the years, the school district has grown to include many of the surrounding communities, having a profound impact on the city, North Clark County, and the thousands who have attended over the past 100 years. Despite its rocky beginnings, Tiger pride has transcended those differences and remains strong in the community today. While the formation of the schools was certainly the most lasting change in 1910, there was something else coming that year that would usher in a new era in the community and beyond. The world was calling, and Battleground answered. The telephone was not new to the area in 1910, having been in use at Fort Vancouver's Officers' Row since 1879. Invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, by the end of the century, the Bell Telephone Company had a firm hold on the new technology. Bell's patents had expired by 1895, opening the door for new companies to enter the market. Rural residents took advantage, extending service to their towns which previously had been ignored by the large company. Battleground Telephone Company's switchboard was located at Grant Morgan's. These switchboards were a mass of wires and receptacles, requiring the operator, or central, to manually route the calls.
When I was going to Clark College in the 50s, we still had that type of a system at the main office, and I earned 50 cents an hour during my lunch hour plugging and unplugging those things. There were these little holes in a board, and underneath each hole, at our particular one, it had the name or the room number of the different teachers and their rooms, professors. And so when we would get the call into the main switchboard, you'd hear that in your ears, and then they'd say who they wanted, and then you would find that spot and plug it in.
The early centrals were vital to the operation of the systems, and they were admired by all. Ruby Hollenbeck was Battleground's first central, and Nanny Hash took over in 1918, moving the operation to her home.
I know it was a respected occupation. Nanny Hash was loved by everybody, and she was probably the longest at that job of anyone.
In 1920, Pacific Telephone and Telegraph acquired the city's phone service, moving to the former Morgan's Meat Market building on Main Street. Nanny Hash, along with more than 47 operators over the years, provided round-the-clock service to all.
And it was right by the creek. And they had a stove in there, and bed, but you couldn't go to bed because the phone might ring. Because Elsie Sontag, she stayed there at night so Mrs. Hash could stay in her own house. She'd go in the back room because she had a bed in there and go to bed, and then never rang much at night anyway. But somebody had to be there all night long. I remember that little telephone office really well.
These early phone systems were designed for utility, not privacy, and the residents relied on the honor system to guard their secrets.
Well, and the other fun thing about those old telephones was the way that someone knew that it was their ring. There was one ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingies, or a long one and a short one, and everybody knew their code, and that's when they would pick up their phone.
Yes.
And you'd hear everyone else's too, but you wouldn't pick it up unless it was your own. Everybody didn't have an individual line on these old systems. They did at the school, but not for the party lines out in the country. There'd be as many as 10 people on the line. And so you'd pick up the receiver and then you'd lay it down if somebody was on it. Well, there were those, they just kind of put their hand over and they knew what was going on in the community.
I remember that because I was staying out to Woolridge's. They had a bunch of kids. And we always went there and stayed overnight. Get something different to eat anyway. And her mother called her, I think her name was Betty. She called her every morning after. When she got up, she called up. And then everybody lifts up the receiver and knows what they're talking about. And she'd, tell about her mother and what she was doing and all. And it went on every day, every morning.
The arrival of the schools and telephone positioned the community to move into the next decade. New businesses continued to be established to satisfy the needs of the growing town. Those businesses brought jobs, and jobs brought people. In 1912, Doc Steckel arrived, and his impact was felt throughout the community.
He was a man who really loved Battleground. He was not only the doctor, he was the coach of the team, and he'd been a well-known football player at his alma mater, which I believe was Michigan or Michigan State, before he came to Battleground. So he was an athlete, he was a promoter of athletics, and he was probably as good a doctor as there was at that time.
By the mid-teens, the area's farmers were producing more than was needed locally, offering the opportunity to capitalize on their good fortune. These farmers would team their efforts, forming cooperative organizations to process and sell their goods. These early enterprises were often poorly funded, and most failed shortly after opening. Battleground's first cheese factory was opened in 1903 by L.G. Allen, lasting only 4 years. In 1917, a new co-op was formed, and it too would fail after only 1 year. But the demand remained, and in 1924, the Battleground Dairymen's Cooperative Association began its cheese operation, and under the guidance of manager Henry Reek, this venture became quite successful and well known beyond the town.
The Dairymen's Co-op, and it's had various names through the years, but for a long time it was the largest employer, and it had its dairy products were very well known.
While the area's businesses were thriving, another important part of daily life was growing in the community. Peter Onsdorf had led the efforts to open Battleground's first church. In 1906, the first Christian church opened to serve the growing local population. In 1918, Maple Grove's Methodist Episcopal Church building was relocated to the southwest corner of Main and Parkway. The original Maple Grove building had opened in 1889, but by 1921, low membership led the Methodist and Christian churches to merge, forming the non-denominational Battleground Community Church. North of Battleground, Dublin's Sacred Heart Catholic Church building began use in 1877, and joined those in Battleground when a new building was constructed in 1928. Of course, the local residents were also interested in recreation, and to the north of town, the potential of Battleground Lake was being realized. The lake had always been a great place to go fishing, for a swim, or just a day with the family, but it was about to become the place to be. Originally called Crater Lake, the name was changed to avoid confusion with the more famous lake in Oregon. In 1916, Henry Blystone built a boathouse and dressing rooms for his new resort, and the lake soon became a popular destination for recreation. The operation grew over time to include a pool hall, dance hall, and commissary, drawing thousands to enjoy the fun. In 1921, Steve LaRouche took over operation of the resort. Always an entrepreneur, he operated stores, the movie theater, and a cannery in Battleground before turning his marketing skills to the lake.
And then there's a big dance hall in the back. And they danced on Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. And then you could swim in there, and there was all boards to walk along to the swimming pool. And separate swimming pools, you know, one for the boys and one for the girls. Get down in there, you couldn't drive. In those days, you couldn't drive down there because it was straight down like that. And if you got down there, you couldn't get out because you didn't have enough power to get up to the top.
LaRouche remained until 1948, and the lake has remained a popular destination for decades. By the 1920s, the small settlement of Battleground had been established, moved, re-established, and expanded to become a vibrant, self-contained community. The arrival of the railroad and its capabilities signaled a spurt in growth equal to what was happening throughout the western United States at that time. And like those other towns, Battleground was poised and ready for what was to come. The pioneers who carved this area from raw wilderness are gone now. Only their stories remain, in many cases through photographs and the memories of their descendants. For more of those stories and pictures, check out the book Battleground In and Around, compiled and authored by Louise Allworth Tucker and first published in 1976 in conjunction with the United States Bicentennial Celebration. What started as a small pamphlet grew to a 400-plus page book covering the history of Battleground and the surrounding areas. Over 1,000 photos loaned by area pioneer families help bring the stories to life, giving faces to the names and a glimpse into their early lives. The original 1976 printing sold out quickly, as did another in 1984. The book is now available in its third printing, and you'll want to get yours before they're gone. You can order your copy today at battlegroundhistorybook.com or pick one up at select Battleground retailers. If you're interested in seeing some of the local history firsthand, you owe yourself a short trip north to Amboy to the North Clark Historical Museum. Located at the intersection of 399th Street and State Road 503, the museum is located in the former Amboy United Brethren Church, which opened in 1910 and has been renovated by the Museum Foundation. The museum contains many artifacts donated by area pioneer families, along with their stories and research material relating to the North Clark County and Lewis River Basin pioneers. Open Saturdays from noon to 4, the friendly staff is always more than happy to assist you when you visit. For more information, be sure to check out their website online. The Clark County Historical Museum in Vancouver is another resource for local history buffs, and they've recently placed many of their photos online for public viewing. For more information, be sure to visit their website. And for another look at the school district's heritage, you'll want to see the Centennial Celebration video. With interviews and memories from students and teachers alike, you get a great look at the more personal side of school life. Pick up your copy today at the high school student body office. I hope you've enjoyed this journey through the early years of Battleground as much as I have. No matter how this area has changed over the years or where life has taken me, every time I see this sign, I can't help but know that I'm back home. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you in my travels. Until then, thanks for the memories, Battleground.